In 1996, there was a riot on the yard, and out of that, one inmate came with the idea of, hey, we got to do something different and get people in a circle and talk. Pat Nolan was a skinhead, and he had begun moving away from white supremacist politics. He was the prison boxing champ at Old Folsom, charismatic guy. He had already told them dudes, man, I'm not with this racist crap. And he was serving life without. He was never getting out. He was going to die there. After the riot, he was like, no, it's not going to happen. I'm done, and I'm going to do something about this. And to go against convict culture is like suicide. He created this space and this group of guys from different gangs, different races, and they ended up forming Inside Circle. The initial stages of hearing what they were trying to do, I was like, nah, we don't kumbaya together. We're not going in the chapel and holding hands and singing. And then I'm out there on the yard and I'm in the middle of everything moving politically, gangs, you know, violence, stabbings, drugs, extortion. It was all around me. And this white dude named James McNally walked across the yard to the area we were in, and he called me by my name. And I had a prison moniker. Everybody called me by my nickname. He called me Aaron. And he said, hey, we got a group in the chapel. Would you like to come? I'm like, what do you mean a group? Like, I don't do religious groups. What do you mean? What's a group? And he was like, we do a circle. It's a men's support group. I sat in that circle. Took a minute to wear on me, like, wait a minute, there's nobody gonna do nothing, and why are you talking about that? Why would you tell anybody what happened to you when you were 10 years old? Why would you talk about your mother or your father? Why would you talk about your relationship with your brother? And why are you having emotions? What is going on? Why you don't show, men don't do this. But I would hear these guys break down their trauma and watch this guy support it. And I would watch this guy, you know, lean in and talk about how him telling his story and doing his work affected him and where it brought it up in him. And they weren't just making up shit. They were really talking from the heart, telling the truth about themselves and the places in their lives. And when you said this, I felt this. That happened to me, or that happened to my sister, and there was feeling and connection, and just, there was that human dynamic in the room and that bonding. And suddenly I found I wanted to be a part of that. Wait a minute, this feels good. There's some real pure oxygen here, and that yard out there is toxic. There was some risky stuff. Guys that are so hurt, so deep, that are know nothing but violence, but we're gonna go talk to them about that. This is a level 4 prison. This is one of the most violent yards in America. Early days was, how do I leave the racial shit at the door? How do I just see you as a man? How do we have that conversation? Those weren't things that culture was ready for, but these guys pioneered how to do it. Out of talking to each other and holding space for each other, eventually we grew to love each other. The circles began to grow. And not everybody on the yard was going to group. It was a small population group, but they were the influencers. And it began to change. Well, there was an interesting phenomenon with this work. Suddenly, we went from a race riot 3 times a year to, no, we ain't had a race riot this year. There ain't been a riot on the yard. What's going on? Well, the people with the influence are doing their work. And common sense took over. The warmongering went away. We can be in a space together in a good way, in a real healing dynamic, and anything is possible. I didn't want to walk out those chapel doors and be who I was on that yard. I didn't want to be a guy serving life in prison, a loser that threw his life away. I wanted to be Aaron. That's really at the heart. I wanted to be me. And there were all these things in place that said I couldn't. And I began to deconstruct all that. Why can't I? Why can't I be this guy? And that's kind of how I ended up in Circle. And it works. Been doing this 25 years now. I've watched men get free in prison and suddenly, like, doesn't matter if I get out of prison. I want to. But, you know, I'm free in here, which becomes the most important thing. When you begin to live out of that place and that medicine and that intention, you change the world. One of the men that used to come and staff those circles in California was Steve Spitzer, who is the founder of Jericho Circle. Steve came and they had this big, beautiful experience of this weekend. They learned what was possible with a bunch of really committed men in one room. Steve had that experience and came back and was like, I'm gonna do this too. I'm gonna help people in prison here. And he brought it here to Boston and it began changing lives.
Let's start with a meditation. So let's.
And then guys that had a lot of time began to get out. And we began to ask, how do we take care of these guys? How do we help these guys? How do we keep the experience going so they can build on it?
So I'm like always juggling.
I'm over here leaning into this organization to help develop a legacy for this type of work and create the community support to receive people when they're released from prison and want to make changes in their lives, and really breaking the cycle of recidivism. If we look at the numbers, everyone wants to say, well, the mark for the bar of recidivism is 3 years. He didn't go back to prison, that's a success. That's not the success. What's his quality of life? Or her quality of life? Are they growing? Are they in a community? Are they supported? Are they still doing things and there's just not crimes being committed, but now they're a chronic drug user, a chronic alcoholic? We have to create a healing community. We can become the community focus point, both inside the walls, outside the walls, where everyone matters. Everyone has the opportunity to get the healing they need, to feel the gifts of each other and be in that space where we can give freely. That's what we are at Jericho. We are living that mission right there to create a space where people can be together and heal. And it doesn't matter if you've been to prison. It doesn't matter if you've got a college degree. It doesn't matter if you're from a poor neighborhood. And it doesn't matter who you worship or what color your skin is. How do we create the community relationships so we can see each other, accept each other, and be together? We should be doing this at every prison. Then out of that, you can begin to build community. The world needs this. And somebody has to model it.
Just having me here, it's been a while.
Jericho Circle can provide workforce development, post-secondary education opportunities, reentry housing, transitional housing with the emotional support built in that could then create a pathway for these guys on the inside that have learned how all these processes work and are probably some really good counselors. Let this person who's healed their self come sit down and help other people. Jericho Circle is the possibility of what can be. Some amazing stuff happens in there. We can do that out here. We can do anything we want to do as a community. Let's do it. And let's get in a circle and make it happen.
1, 2, 3.
Unity!